Abraham Lincoln. The Republican Party started in the 1850s. It gathered steam because there was enough, listen to this, there were enough Whigs and enough Democrats that knew that what was happening with slaves was wrong. And they knew the Whigs and the Democrats wouldn't do anything. Congress was just stalled on it and wouldn't do anything. Does any of this sound familiar? And finally, enough on both sides said enough is enough. And within a decade, they had nominated and elected the first Republican president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. And have you seen him? Not an easy election. Whew. January 1st, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation has been issued in 1862. January 1, 1863, it starts, and they begin to implement the Republicans' Confiscation Act of 1862. The Democratic Party continues to support slavery. February 9th, 1864, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton deliver over 100,000 signatures to U.S. Senate supporting, when you hear those two names, Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Stanton, which party do you think of? It's women's rights. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton deliver over 100,000 signatures to the U.S. Senate supporting the Republican plan for constitutional amendment to ban slavery. June 15, 1864, Republican Congress votes for equal pay for African-American troops serving in the U.S. Army. June 28, 1864, Republican majority in Congress repeals the Fugitive Slave Act. October 29, 1864, African-Americans, abolitionist Sojourner Truth, African-American abolitionist Sojourner Truth says of President Lincoln, I was never treated by anyone with more kindness than he has shown me. January 31st, 1865, the 13th Amendment banning slavery passed the U.S. House with unanimous Republican support and intense Democratic opposition. The Republican support, 100%. The Democratic Party support, 23%. That's to ban slavery. March 3rd, 1865, Republican Congress establishes Freemen's Bureau to provide health care, education, and technical assistance to emancipated slaves. That's the Republican Congress. April 8th, 1865, 13th Amendment banning slavery passed by the U.S. Senate. Republican support, 100%. Democrat support, 37%. June 19th. On Juneteenth, U.S. troops land in Galveston, Texas, to enforce a ban on slavery that has been declared for more than 2 years by the Emancipation Proclamation. November 22nd, 1865, Republicans denounced Democratic legislature of Mississippi for enacting black codes, which institutionalized racial discrimination. 1866, Republican Party passes the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to protect the rights. Did you even know there was one? The Republican Party passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866 to protect the rights of newly freed slaves. December 6, 1865, the Republican Party's 13th Amendment banning slavery is ratified. 1865, the KKK launches as a, quote, terrorist arm, end quote, of the Democratic Party.
Of the what party?
The Democratic Party. The Klan.
All right. Wait, the KKK...
You meant the Tea Party. I think you said Democratic Party. You meant the Tea Party.
The terrorist arm of the
Democratic Party. February 5th, 1866, U.S. Representative Thaddeus Stevens, Republican from Pennsylvania, introduces legislation successfully opposed by Democratic President Andrew Johnson to implement 40 acres and a mule relief by distributing land to former slaves. Stopped by the Democrats. April 9th, 1866, Republican Congress overrides Democratic President Johnson's veto, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, conferring rights of citizenship on African Americans, and it becomes law. The Democratic president vetoed the Civil Rights Act. The Republicans stood when they knew what they were all about. April 19th, 1866, thousands assemble in Washington, D.C. to celebrate Republican Party's abolition of slavery. May 10th, 1866, U.S. House passes Republicans' 14th Amendment, guaranteed due process and equal protection of the laws to all citizens. 100% of the Democrats vote no.
Jeez.
I am not a fan of the Republican Party. I am not here as a Republican shill. I don't like them. I'm not a member of the Republican Party. They've lost their way. But let's get history right. July 16th, 1866, Republican Congress overrides Democratic President Andrew Johnson's veto of the Freemen's Bureau Act, which protects former slaves from black codes denying their rights. July 28th, 1866, Republican Congress authorized formation of the Buffalo Soldiers. Yes, the Buffalo Soldiers, 2 regiments of African Americans cavalrymen. July 30th, 1866, Democratic-controlled city of New Orleans orders police to storm racially integrated Republican meetings. The raid kills 40, wounds more than 150. January 8th, 1867, Republicans override Democratic President Johnson's veto of a law granting voting rights to African Americans in D.C. July 19th, 1867, Republican Congress overrides the veto of legislation protecting the voting rights of all African Americans. March 30th, 1868, Republicans begin impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson, who declared, "This country is for white men, and by God, as long as I'm president, it shall be a government of white men." You never learn that. When we had the impeachment trial of Bill Clinton, they always talked about Johnson, but they never taught us this part of history, did they? Ever heard that quote?
No.
You know why? He was a Democrat. May 20th, 1868, Republican National Convention marks the debut of an African-American politician. In fact, many. 2 of them, Pinckney Pinchback and James Harris, attended as delegates, and several serve as presidential electors. 1868, July 9, 14th Amendment passes and recognizes newly freed slaves as U.S. citizens. The Republican Party support, 94%. Democratic Party support, 0. September 3rd, 1868, 25 African Americans in Georgia legislature, all Republicans, expelled by Democratic majority, later reinstated by Republican Congress. September 12th, 1868, civil rights activist Tunis Campbell and all other African Americans in the Georgia Senate, every one a Republican, expelled by a Democratic majority. They were later reinstated by Republican Congress. September 28th, 1868. Democrats in Louisiana murder nearly 300 African Americans who tried to prevent an assault against a Republican newspaper editor. We're coming back to this one. October 7, 1868, Republicans denounced Democratic Party's national campaign theme. The Democratic Party's national campaign theme in 1868. You know what it was? "This is a white man's country. Let white men rule." We're the Democratic Party.
Wow.
October 22, 1868, while campaigning for re-election, Republican James Hines is assassinated by Democratic terrorists who were organized as the KKK. November 3rd, 1868, Republican Ulysses S. Grant defeats Democratic Seymour in a presidential election. Seymour has denounced the Emancipation Proclamation. December 10th, 69, Republican Governor John Campbell of Wyoming Territory, Republican Governor of Wyoming, signs the first in-nation law granting the right to women to vote and to hold office. A Republican. February 3rd, 1870, U.S. House ratifies the 15th Amendment. Democratic support, 3%. Republican support, 97%. February 25, 1870, Hiram Rhodes becomes the first black seated in the U.S. Senate, becoming the first black in Congress and the first black senator.
It's the next year, though, when the Republican War on Women began. Mm-hmm. Right? 1871. Mm-hmm. I think you're about to read
We're about to get to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here we go.
There are so many. I have so many. I'm going to skip. I'm going to skip a whole nother page of these because I want to get to something here at the end. February 28th, 1871, Republican Congress passes the Enforcement Act, providing federal protection for African American voters. March 22nd, 1871, Spartanburg Republican newspaper denounces Klan. The Klan campaign to eradicate the Republican Party in South Carolina. That brings us to this. Remember I said September 28th, 1868, a mob of Democrats massacred nearly 300 African American Republicans in Louisiana. It began when racist Democrats attacked a newspaper editor, a white Republican, and a school teacher for ex-slaves. Several African Americans rushed to the assistance of their friends, and in response, Democrats, quote, went on a Negro hunt, end quote, killing every African American, all of whom were Republicans, as all African Americans at the time were. April 20th, 1871. The Republican Congress enacts the Anti-Ku Klux Klan Act, outlawing the Democratic Party terrorist group, which oppressed African Americans. That's who these people were.
You didn't even get to the 1960s. 1950s,
no, I didn't even,
1960s.
No, I didn't even get to the 1930s or the 1930s or pretty.
I mean, you know, yeah, but as late as the 60s, it was Republicans passing civil rights. Republicans pushing for it, Republicans voting for it, Democrats fighting against it, people like Al Gore Sr. fighting against it. People like Lyndon Baines Johnson, the hero of the left, fighting against it at first.
People saw some of that if they saw Selma. They saw how racist this guy was. And I contend they're still this racist. Look at what they have done to the great city of Detroit. Look what those policies have done. Look what it has brought on to the African American. Look at what the great Democratic policies have done to the city of Washington, D.C., to the city of Philadelphia. Name any city. Cleveland, where the Democrats have ruled since the 1960s. At some point, you say, this doesn't make any sense. At some point, you say, I'm not getting any better. This is not helping me. They are playing this card again. And this time, we have to stand up for ourselves. This time, we have to stand up and say, enough is enough. I know your record. I know who you are. See, I have in the vaults here at the Mercury Studios, I have the anti-democratic and anti-Republican literature that went back and forth. The Republicans used to defend themselves. They used to say, I've had enough. Here's the record. Here's who we are. Here's who you are. Why are we defending our record? Our record is fine. Why are we defending our record? We should be putting them on the offense and asking them to explain their record in Detroit, in Cleveland, in Philadelphia, in Washington, in every city that they have destroyed. Why are we having to explain ourselves? Now they're doing it with another class of people. Gays, women. Remember, it was the Republicans that gave you the right to vote in the first place. The first time they had to drag the progressives kicking and screaming